Everybody, this is Steve Cady, and we're here with our OD&C Doctoral Education Global Initiative focused on advancing the field of OD&C through doctoral research and education. And it's November 29th, 2022, and we have people from all over the world, and we were very much at the beginning phases of our initiative. Today is focused on why we are here is, I'm getting my cursor to move. Where did you go? I like when cursors evade me. So our purpose for today is to formalize the foundation for the initiative's collaborative planning process and ensure we are getting off to a great start. And so we're planning to plan, as Dilbert would say, to plan the planny thing. And then it has a person running off and they're looking with a fishnet trying to find the person who went crazy. And but we all know in our world that's really about executive function and engaging the brain fully in making sure we are intentional about what we're about to embark on. What I'd love for you to do is in the chat, if you could, don't hit enter, but just in the chat, just type a reaction to your conversation, maybe a highlight or a point or an appreciation. Don't hit enter. Just type something down and take 30 seconds to do that. I'm going to open the chat up. I got to put something here. Okay, here we go. One second here. Okay, hit enter. Bang. It's a little chatter fall. So if anybody's willing, it can be anybody. If somebody could read through that and just kind of, if you all could read through it, but if someone's willing, I'm going to ask if somebody could just summarize any connection or theme amongst that. And I'll keep us moving here. So with the, that's the purpose for today. And who is here? Really, we just did that in a breakout, and you all got to see who you are, where you are, and why you're here today. But really, around the question was, what's the kindred connection that you have with people here? And the history and context for those that are here for the first time is this initiative was proposed at the OD&C division last summer. Was talked about over the previous year with David Bright's leadership in terms of building out the OD&C as a hub within the academy and playing a convening role. And so I have a passion for doctoral education because of our doctoral program at BGSU, and really have been connected to that and seeing an opportunity, a gap and an opportunity around that. So I propose that we bring people together who are invested in, interested in, and committed to, in one way, shape, or form, to doctoral education, specifically in the field of OD&C, for advancing the field of OD&C. And so that is sort of our history and context. And I proposed it. It was approved. Thank you, David. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, others at Ignacio, for your support. And the charge around the purpose statement is about advancing the field. And we want to connect faculty, programs, educators, students, anybody who is in any place that cares about it. And so we've got the variety of people. And one of the things that we focused on is that you can be involved with this in any way you want. You can be a part of the working group. So today is a bit of a working group day. And what I mean by that is a working group and advisory group and people that might want to be involved. But we have me playing this role. We have the working team, which is really going to be that project management, coordination, facilitation team, advisory, and then people that want to be kept informed. And all are welcome to any event. You'll always be invited. Just know that I want you to feel that you can rotate amongst those roles as you need. And so evolving and revolving. We also want to make sure that we take the time to allow people to feel a part of what we're doing if they jump in a year from now. That's really important. So I use this principle of evolving and revolving. Like an evolving team, as people come on, it evolves and we get new people on, and everybody can come in whenever they want, when they're ready, and they can evolve around the roles, the working team, advisory, or keeping informed. The revolving piece is also like the revolving door, which is sometimes you have to step away and then you can come back and you're always welcome back. So it's not that one, if you're in and you have to be in all in and everything. It's we want to make sure that people can come and go as they need to. And and I'm committed, and the working group, I think it generally will be probably committed to really try to keep some coherence in the process. We're also looking for a variety of people to be involved in. And as you can see, the participants and partners, we want to also be looking at how we can engage more partner organizations. I think long-term, my dream is that we get a major grant. I mean, I'm not talking like small dollars. I'm talking big bucks to advance the field in service of the world, and like through United Nations, through other types of large organizations in the United States and beyond. Our agenda for today is to review the summary of our work, and we're going to jump right in. The focus for today, as long as we get out of here with a clarity around purpose and outcomes for the collaborative process, not doctoral education. So I want to be real clear. It will come up and we'll always put it in the parking lot. What should doctoral education be? What can we do? Those are things that we're going to create a larger in the spring as we move through this new year. The initiative is going to be focused on that question. What is the field, OD&C through doctoral education? But what we are looking at is, what is our purpose as a group? What are we trying to do in this collaborative process? And so we get clear about the purpose and outcomes of the process. Who do we want to involve? And what the specific process will be. Joe will talk a little bit about weaving and the role of weaving. And Joe, I think when we get to the planning process, I'll ask you to spend about 5-7 minutes talking about that, if you would, about your thoughts on that, on how we weave, and really kind of what the implications of that are for how we work as a community, this more organic community that needs enough structure so that we can make sure that we're making progress. Then we'll look at next steps in the next meeting. So let's jump in with the first thing here, a summary of our previous work. In the last meetings we've had, the question was, why doctoral education? Why does it matter? And this is what people said before. I'm going to put a link in. I'm going to put the link in. I meant to do that. I'm sorry. This is a collaborative document. It's going to be open. Anybody can add anything you want to this. I don't care, as long as you don't use cuss words or say anything mean. So, so there is, seriously, don't worry. You can't lose anything. One of the beautiful things about Google Docs and products in the suite, you don't lose anything. It keeps keystroke by keystroke. I'm going to make sure it says that everybody can edit here. This is now, let me see, make sure it's, that's weird. Do you see how this thing is acting up? Okay, anyone with a link can edit. So if I go there and create edit. So now you edit. So done. So now you can edit. So you can add more, right? Why doctoral? If you want to add something, clarify. But these are some of the things that came up in terms of why doctoral education matters, because we can develop thought leaders, because we can connect academia with practice, we can stay abreast and updated, we can teach and develop leaders, consultant, educators, researchers, we can shape the world as an intellectual community. The capabilities of OD&C can save our world and maybe create a better world. We can but we also, through doctoral education, can keep OD&C viable. That's probably one of my beliefs, is that we've got to make a compelling case for the viability, the importance of organizational development and change truly as an evidence-based field. And I think that's what doctoral education can do. Look at new frontiers and work with an emerging new student population. What I'm finding, I don't know if you all are seeing this, there's a group of people that are in their 50s, 60s, 40s and 30s as well, but I would say 50s and 60s, who are saying, hey, I've got another 20, 30 years. I want to be in a tenure track position in a research tier 1 institution, maybe, or I want to be a lecturer at a teaching university. I want to be an adjunct, or I want to be bridging the gap of both. I want to be a researcher and I want to do some research. I want to do consulting, and I want to also be management, but I want to step back from the consulting and do more of this, or I want to step back from managing and do more of this. There's a whole population that I'm seeing. It's exciting to see these folks in the classroom with our students in our doctoral program. I've seen it now, we're in year 4. It is absolutely energizing to see the kind of impact that they're having on our students and our programs. It's absolutely energizing. So that's me. So add anything else you want up there that for you, if you want to add anything, but that's some of the comments that came up. But why is doctoral education important? Let me pause and just give opportunity. Anybody want to add or say something? Because OD&C is full of introverts, which a lot of my good
Hey.
friends in OD&C are introverts. So
Hi, Steve. This is Ann. A comment.
Mhm.
Actually, I think this captured it well. So appreciate that. And then I am, I stood up in my chair. Can you do that? Can you stand up in your chair? Anyway, I got excited about the whole idea of a grant of this bigger, right? Advancing the field. So I just wanted to share that reaction with you. I don't know if it's the summary of the previous work or your intentionality that we'll get to, but it really.
But make sure you add that somewhere in these slides if you could, Anne.
Oh,
Please, see wherever it might fit, make sure that that point is explicit. You can sign your name to it if you want, or just put explicitly what you see when you see where it fits. What's most important is we just connect and we know that. So however you wish to add your voice into this, please just add to the document.
thanks, Steve.
So, yeah. Anybody else want to contribute a thought?
I have one.
Yeah.
I really like the comments, shape the world as intellectual community. I think that, we have a lot of people in, like, for example, MBA and things like that, or even a doctorate or PhD in business is important. But in this world where even, my generation, I'm an elder millennial, it's very focused on people and feelings and social media and presence in the world. And so I think being able to mix those two, like that, that human side of business is going to be super important for any kind of advancement or success in the business world. So.
Yeah, and I'm a part of the Societal Impact Accelerator for AACSB. For those of you in business schools, that's the accrediting body for colleges of business. If you go onto the website, you'll see the accelerator. And a big push is about people, planet, profit, and bringing back the people, bringing in and ensuring colleges of business are emphasizing the people side of things. So it's a really good opportunity because they're building leadership competencies for societal impact and are going to look at getting colleges of business to be more focused on that in their education and curriculum, which gives us a great opportunity because it's all the stuff that when you look at what's being talked about, it's all that.
Hi,
Anybody
Steve,
want to add anything else? Go ahead.
Hi, Steve. This is Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
It seems that I've highlighted keep OD&C viable in the world. It seems to me that if that encompasses everything that we're talking about here, that is the overall purpose. But what I'm missing here, and maybe I think this is what you're getting to a little bit with what you're just saying, is that we're doing this work in the context of the Academy of Management. And placing the doctoral education in that context, it means in the context of business schools. And it seems that relationship in terms of where OD&C is, when we say viable in the world, I think that that world includes business schools, and we need to be kind of practical on understanding what our benefit and robustness means to the business schools that these programs are in, and because I think that relationship has a lot to do with the viability.
Yeah. And Lisa, I'll offer to you, this will come as part of the planning process. I've been doing a lot of data collection. I've been looking at where are all the doctoral programs, what colleges are they in, where all the master's programs. You'll be interested to know that I think the large majority of them are not in colleges of business. So but I'll be sharing that data as we get into more of the getting into the process. But but I am in, so it's like my world. That's what I see, right? And in the academy, we do have some faculty also in the OD&C division, and David can speak to this, and Richard can as well. I think we have people that are College of Business, but also in other colleges that are in the division. And we have a lot of practitioner scholars or pracademics or scholar practitioners that are also in the academy, a higher percentage than any other division.
Steve, go ahead. I was going to say, one of the things that I would add is that, and it kind of goes to a different side, but it's broadening perspective transformation in a group of people who carry that forward into organizations and communities.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, so I'll go to the next slide here, which is.
Can I just add one more, Steve?
Yeah, sure, Joe.
It's something that's probably too obvious to actually incorporate, I suppose, but that this gives the opportunity for us to reflect or turn back into ourselves and improve the field and reinvent the field or integrate the field, because there's a lot of soul searching going within OD. There are different streams, and maybe this gives us a chance to kind of reinvent the field.
Joe, that's really well said.
Re-energize the field.
Can you make sure you type that into the slide somewhere, into where it's appropriate? I think that's important. We don't want to lose that. And same thing with you, Kathy, if you could make sure. And hi, Matt, welcome. So yeah, so the next slide is more of the comments, but what is possible now with doctoral education? You can go to that next slide. You can see these are a lot of comments from different folks when we report it out. You can see just kind of a sense of a lot of similar things to the previous slide, just more of this notion of connecting scholarship, that on the right, the kinds of things around using technology now more than we could ever before, co-creating rigorous ideas for practice, elevating the values of the field, humanizing organizations, using technology now to communicate and connect in ways we never could have done before, building greater critical thinking skills, the scholar practitioner academics, interpersonal behavioral aspects, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, collaboration, and co-creation of researchers and practitioners, and you can see just a whole host of things. Anybody want to add anything here? Because it is related to slide 9. They're both somewhat related, but make sure that your big hot item is in here somewhere. If it's not, please add it. And I can type it for you if you're just looking on the screen, no problem. Anybody want to add any reactions or reflections or what's jumping out to you, what you're seeing up here?
Well, if you're asking for what is my big hot item that's not there, it's, you know, how do we name the revitalization of how we do social science? Like, just give up the presumption that we're going to be able to keep doing it the way we have inherited. My language for that is action research for transformations. Any label is good, but some signal that we're making, you know, we're transforming our own capacity for learning and change with stakeholders. That's what makes a big difference.
Can you make sure you put that in there, Hillary, into the slide here somewhere, please? That's really well said. Anywhere you put it's fine. Nothing will be lost.
How about I stick it in the chat and you find a place for it?
I'll be glad to do that for you. Yeah. Someone's, I think, someone's typing it for you right now on the.
Oh, they are. Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank
So if you want more added, there's a little bit more you said. Put it in the chat what you said, because I think you elaborated a little bit. I'll drop it in. We won't miss that. And so here's where we get to the plan anything. I wish I had that Dilbert cartoon. What's that? Yeah. Hey, Ignacio. Yeah.
Yes. In my case, I love to see as a possibility like a more international collaboration, like countries or like areas of the world that has not been very well represented in current theory and practice, to have more possibilities to interact with people in US. I can talk from people in Chile, South America, have the possibility of interacting with people in the US, Europe, where more of the knowledge has been produced, and also have more resources in our native language.
Say more about that last part. Could you, Ignacio?
Yes, because, for example, I maybe not in doctoral education here in Chile, because it's a requisite that you have to speak English, but at a master level, for example, is very hard for us who teach organizational development and change to find resources, for example, like that are updated in Spanish. So it would be great to have more those kind of resources, recent research, recent discoveries that can be made available for people in Spanish, Portuguese, or I know other kind of other languages that are different than English.
That's a really good point. And what I'm going to do is there's a slide. I'm going to make a slide 17, Ignacio. And what I want to do is I'm going to call it a parking lot. So a lot of times in these discussions, the what comes up is ideas that we don't want to forget when we get into the strategy discussion and start formalizing the strategy. And so I'm just kind of
Perfect.
right now doing that at 17, and then there you go. And then I'm going to delete this first part out here. And we just want to make sure that if there's something you want to make sure is part of the strategy conversation, we get to the strategy formulation, please make sure it gets into the parking lots. We don't lose it. I'll also comb through all this stuff and try to pull stuff down as we go.
Perfect.
Anybody have anything else they want to add before we move into the next piece? Okay. So, and feel free to always interrupt me. I welcome that. I don't have a problem with that. So in the planning process, I have a basic acronym that I use, and I part of the work I do around collaborative processes and techniques is around how do you plan a collaborative process, and when you look, and then what do you do to plan afterwards to implement what comes out of them? One of the biggest challenges to strategy is all about formulation. A little bit less is done on implementation, and that we oftentimes get with large group methods and large group events. The question is, what happens after them? What's being done to follow through? And project management is a big issue, and we know that change management has evolved. So I work with PMBOK and the Project Management Institute. I just kind of created an acronym, a PLAN, and I just wanted you to understand where it came from. And the only reason I did it was because I was working with Medical City down in Florida, and I had a thing called PODR, Purpose and Outcomes and something. And the president said, I don't like that FN poderizing this. I hate that. It's horrible. And I'm like, okay, okay. What can we call it then that would be okay with you? Because he couldn't even get past the acronym to help us plan. So all of a sudden plan came up. And so I just use it now. My students love it and it helps. And so it's just simple, right? It's just the basic steps. It's Lewin's and Lippitt's. It's Lippitt's 3 questions. If you all are familiar with Lippitt's work, what's the purpose? Who needs to be involved? What conversations need to take place? If you know, those are the 3 big Lippitt questions. I just added the N. What do we need to make sure that conversation happens? Okay. So I just added the 4th part there to that. And so it's just PLAN. But basically, this is what I want us to talk about today as we move to wrapping up. And when we get into this, here were comments from the previous meeting around what kind of process do we need. So if you could take a second to look at this slide here, you can click to it or zoom in on it with your own screen. But you can see some of the comments, and we think about what kind of planning process do we need. And I'm just going to be quiet. And if anybody wants to pick out what's important in this list or what would you add, and you can just click in here and add, it's not a problem. This is more of a brainstorm. Anybody need more time? Okay. If you have anything you want to add, you can add. This is just some of the, so in looking at all the stuff that everything we created, I wanted to look at a clear purpose and outcomes. And Kathy Dannemiller is smiling right now up in heaven at me because she was my dear mentor and she was big on purpose. I don't know if those of you that knew her, she was a master of purpose. She taught me very well about this. I think here's what I see as our purpose for our planning process. So I'd like us all to look at this and make sure that if we think about a successful planning process, not a successful initiative, but a successful planning process as a first phase for the initiative, what would you add, modify, or delete here? Does anybody need me to read this? If so, I'm glad to. If I look around, just so you all know, I have 3 screens. So I have the big, and I have chat over here and attendees. So I'm looking around, I'm just doing that for that reason.
Steve, it's Lisa again. Say that I like this, the purpose and outcomes idea, and the purpose to me seems fine. I feel like that the specificity of how you said this is purpose and outcomes for a planning process would be helpful to put that in there, and because it separates it, as you said, from the purpose of the project itself.
Could you put that in there in a way that makes sense to you? Are you able to do it? Or I can do it, but can you? Are you in?
Well,
the
I just think even if if we say purpose and outcomes of the planning process,
Okay. Yeah.
because that's
I'll do it right
the
here.
context. Yeah, that's the context that you wanted us to think of this in, and I think for the sake of documentation, I think
Right
that would
there,
be
like that?
helpful. Yeah.
I think as ODC people, we're often accused of being too process oriented. It's tricky for us, right? Because we want to amplify process. But I wonder if the language of the UN SDGs, the sustainability goals, given how they're they're rolling down on us, would give us a little bit more traction with what's the outcome here? What is all this process for?
I think you could add an outcome there that relates to that. If you could, Hillary, if you could maybe think of how you would articulate that as an outcome. You can put it in the chat. I'll put it in there as another outcome, and we can look at that.
Also, maybe this is already in there, but what comes to mind for me is we need to make it known the need for such programs across the world. And I'm not sure if that's in here or not, but that seems to be a real important purpose, is that we're demonstrating and making known the importance and criticalness of having these programs.
So David, there's two places I like that. There's 2 ways to take that. First, in terms of the planning process, we want the planning process to help us do that, right? We actually want people to be energized and engaged in that through the planning process. But I'd also go down to slide 17 and put it in there, because the purpose of the initiative, one of these goals of the initiative might be that as well, right? So one of our goals coming out of the planning process would be that as too. So if you're willing, David, are you able to edit in your computer? If you
I don't think no, I can't do it. I'll leave it up to you.
No. Can you type it in the chat at least? I just want to get your words.
Sure.
Type it in the chat, and if somebody can help me, if you can copy paste, there's 2 ways to think about it, David. One is what you just said in the context of how our planning process can elevate that, but also what we want this to also be part of the initiative. So if someone would be willing to look in the chat, David, if you could put it in there and then we'll pull it down, that'd be great. I want to make sure you all, my goal is this is our purpose and outcomes. So make sure that as you look at it, that you like it.
So for the planning process, I want to have in the background the comments that somebody made about integrating the practitioners in the AACSB and this initiative. And in addition to using the language of SDGs that Hillary suggests, since ODC is so human focused, I think we also need to look at the inner development goals, which are being developed as a consortium in parallel to the SDGs. So I'd like to, I don't know if it's Carol, just put purpose.
Make sure you put it in the parking lot, as well as
that's what I wanted.
Put it there as well as put maybe here as you see fit. Miguel, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to think about this process about planning or strategy thinking in connection with, the what is typically thought of as an environmental scan. So how is this project, this idea of planning this, connected with the environment, namely the world? How are we connecting with the world? What is the needed? So as one does planning, what is that environment about? What is there? What is the, I often use the word hunger. What is the hunger out there? And then how can this process then be responsive and responding to that in the planning process? So it's, you know, what is typically called an environmental scan, but in terms of what are we, what is this responding to that is out there, not just within?
Yeah. So we got two ways to incorporate that, what you said in here. One, environmental scanning is a particular activity that we can do in service of being connected to that larger global context that you just described. And so what I would say is when we get to the steps, there's going to be a spot there to make sure that we're doing a proper environmental scan. What I want to make sure we don't lose is you want to do an environmental scan in order to what? And that's an important outcome. So that's how I differentiate outcomes from actions. Is outcomes are the answer to the in order to. Our action items, we do those in order to achieve these outcomes. So what I want to make sure is that in these outcomes, that in order to do environmental scan, in order to, that you see it somehow captured in these outcomes here that are on the screen. If not, can you change it or make a suggestion in the chat for us to make it better? I want to
Thank
make,
you.
yeah, I want to make sure your voice is in there. It's an important point. So make sure as you look at this, you go, yeah, for me, I honestly, you got to read this and say, I've got to stay involved with this. You've got to read this and say, I want to be involved. It's got to be compelling to you. It's got to be worthwhile. So when you look at this, say, yes, these are the outcomes. This, and it could be one of them is this will make this worthwhile to me. It'll be worth my time to continue to come back. So I need to make sure that you see that in there, your value proposition or your value statement in there for you personally. It's got to be in there. If it's not, please put it in there. That's important to me. And 3 people have raised their hands, so please jump in.
I think I was first. This is Richard. 2 things. And I think given what you've just been talking about, Steve, it applies both to the purpose and outcomes of the planning process and the actual, initiative. When I look at these things, I see an implication toward continuous learning. And I would sort of like to see that captured in some way. We can talk about doctoral education, which sort of, once you've got your doctorate, it sort of ends. But we're all involved in this because I think we all want continuous learning beyond our doctoral programs. The other thing, and this goes back to sort of Hillary's point, I met yesterday with Jody Hoffer-Gattel, who's coming on to the OD&C board, about a paper she's working on. And the paper really speaks about human sustainability. We usually talk about environmental sustainability and all that, but I think there's something about what we're talking about here is really about human sustainability. And other comments, previous comments, have sort of addressed the human aspect, which is so important and basic to OD&C. Thanks.
That's really good, Richard. Can you make sure that's in here? And I see, again, that fitting in 2 places, our planning process, emphasizing that, but also the actual strategy document that comes out of the end that we build. It should be there in that parking lot. Are you willing to put that in here and make sure that that's in here?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, thank you. Patrice, what about you? You have your hand up, and David, you have yours up, and then David Bright, and then David. David, how do I say your last name? Zabla?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. I just want to make sure.
Get the S, just work on the Z.
Yeah. I see your name all the time. I've never had to say it.
So Steve, for me, a thing that I would love to see that would make me even more enthused about being part of this group is in this planning process, maybe working towards something concrete and fairly earlier in our process. So to imagine not just a kind of generalized vision, but one thing we could do, beyond this great series of meetings planning what to do, like what would we envisage to be an event, whether that be large scale or small scale, and not to plan it here, but just in the planning process, I would love to have some concrete sense of something that's gonna happen to get us moving.
Can you write that? Could you put that down there as one of the outcomes? I like that. I thought of a quick win, but I think a concrete action in the short term that really generates, in my words, momentum, or generates energy, or generates, that excitement. Could you write something down that fits for you and be very specific about what you mean by that and the outcomes there? You can just add it into the outcome slides. I think that's really important, like to have something right out of the gates that's starting like in the spring that like maybe captures people's attention. David Bright. If you're talking, you're muted. You just disappeared on me. Where did David go? Did we just lose him?
I'm here. There we go.
Oh, there you are. It's like
lowered
moving
my
around.
hand. Maybe that took me out of the main view. I'll raise my hand.
No, it's just people are moving around. So I see, and then boom, down below, that kind of thing.
All right. So just building on a couple of things that have already emerged, related to that last bullet point, for me, that this is actually quite important that we define the for what. And I guess I'd like to offer that whether in this forum or in another related group in the OD&C division, or we need to be, I think, clear about the end of OD&C. Like, what is it that we're trying to accomplish as a field? Like, what is the highest purpose of everything we do? And I think absent that vision of the aim for all the work that we do, we will continue to spin. We can do a lot of activities, but we are not always clear on putting in a research vernacular, what is the dependent variable or the dependent variables of what we do? How do we move the needle in improving the world in some fashion, whether that be the world at large or organizations or communities. So that's one comment.
I don't want to lose that. So make sure that's a point about, you want the planning process to set us up for that, right? You want us to make sure that
or at least support. Yeah,
supporting it or connecting into it. So I don't want to lose that on these outcomes here. So if anybody's listening to David and willing to type, I'd appreciate that, kind of capturing what David just said. That's the first point that you were making. I don't want to lose that. What's this?
For me, that's actually one of the highest priorities. It has been for some time. The second thing is, I think we need to, using the weaving metaphor, we need to weave whatever efforts we're doing here with efforts that are taking place in parallel. So, for example, Ignacio and I have been working really hard over the last couple of months to try and envision what the OD&C division website should be. And guess what? We have a placeholder for teaching and resources and education, and no content to go there. It's a natural place for outcomes such as what we've been talking about here. I'm thinking about, your first bullet, have a common database of information related to history, etc. So some discussion about like where best to host those kinds of resources or make connections to those kinds of resources, I think would be helpful for us. That's getting a little bit into the weeds, but I think the bigger point is to do our best to weave together and create synergies across multiple strands of work that are all related to hopefully helping us to achieve this common aim that we all have, to further the field as probably our highest endeavor.
Okay, cool. And make sure it gets into these outcomes, David. When you read them, I think people are adding, so we're all helping each other. So if somebody's thinking out loud or brainstorming, if you could help capture what they're saying, that's important. So make sure, David, you look at these outcomes that you see it in there. And if also in the parking lot, which is slide 17, you can always add stuff that you think needs to be a part of the larger strategy conversation too. David.
Yeah, I was thinking that what came to mind is we might think of ourselves as the next generation national training laboratories, or the next generation Tavistock Institute. And it might be interesting to sort of look back on the history of those institutes and what was it that drove them to become what they ended up doing, and all the innovation, that came out of those, came out of NTL and is still coming out of the Tavistock Institute. When I was living in Boston about 10 years ago, one day I took a ride up to Bethel, Maine, and I looked at those buildings where they used to have all those sessions. And I thought to myself, this must have been an incredible place at one time. And, what is it today? Who are we today? So maybe looking back and thinking about this whole next generation might be inspirational to us. That's
really great, David. I don't want to lose that. If there's, again, can somebody, if you type in the chat, we'll get it on there, David, or somebody could summarize that. I don't want to lose that, David. That's really important. Please put that down somewhere. It's really important. Lisa, your hands is up.
Hi, yes, in agreement with many of the thoughts here, along the same lines, also as a doctoral candidate or student, I've seen a successful either matching, rotational kind of mentoring programs where it could be a branch of a conference where students are matched with a senior scholar or a scholar that is able to provide some of the insights and resources mentioned either on a particular project or stage that they're on, and then either on a rotational basis or maybe quarterly basis. That can be one way to offer or connect as far as an event or connected to some of the ideas mentioned earlier.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Make sure you put your comment. There's different places for that, because that's a specific activity which can fit in the A section of the slides where the actions can also be a part of our larger strategy conversation. If you go down to that slide, I think it's slide 17, slide 14 is.
Oh, is there a link to the slides, or is it someone?
Yeah, I'll put a link in the
you.
chat for you. It was there. You might have come in. It's in the chat, but I'll put it in there right now for you. Give me a second here. Gotta find the chat. Chat disappeared on me. Where is it? Here it comes. There it is in the chat. There's the link to the slides. So thanks, Lisa. Anybody have anything else that they want to say? I don't want to say this is speak now, forever hold your peace, because it's an evolving, revolving plan, right? So it's also a great concrete organic document for us in our planning process.
Steve, this is Lisa Meyer again.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to, I guess, build a little bit on what both Richard Stackman had to say and David Bright. And that's about this concept of sustainability. When Richard brought it up, he said that we generally think of it in terms of an eco-sustainability and went to human sustainability. But I really think that the challenge is really to think about sustainability in a sense of a value rather than specifically applying it to different aspects of the world, because sustainability is important when you look at business models. Sustainability is important when you look at OD&C. So sustainability as a value could, in both our work and in both our existence as a community, is, I think, a way to expand on that idea. And I think and it fits into what David Bright was saying. I think the for what of our work is really about how is what we do sustainable into the future. And by the way, I love the shout out to the staff at Tavistock and NTL, but I also think that rather than saying that we want to be the next of those models, it's what, you know, I'm always inspired when I go back to those models and look at, but I think of what does that mean today and how we're doing our work. So I like that too.
Thanks, Lisa. Make sure that, again, that's in here somewhere. I just I wrote it down in the N under needs in terms of what are the values we want to be mindful of throughout our planning process, the sustainability nature of it as a value, but it can fit somewhere else in here too. So make sure it's in here in the way that you see it. Anybody else want to add anything to make it something compelling for you, worthwhile for you?
I'm
Okay.
I'm curious what Joe has to offer in this notion of weave, because way back in the beginning of the slides, I saw the notion of interdisciplinarily, interstitial, interactive, and I have spent many years in universities where it's very little of that we are so compartmentalized and segmented that a business school rarely has concourse with anyone in liberal arts, and we've got to break that down too. So in our thinking, weaving is a big deal. And Joe, I'm sorry to jump into your agenda, Dave, but I'm fascinated with what Joe had said the last time and what he might say this time.
Yeah, I think that's good. And Joe, if you could maybe 5 minutes, I'm just looking at our time because I want us to get on process steps, but could you give us a little primer on your thoughts on weaving from what you talked last time?
It might help us.
And you're on mute, Joe. Joe, you're on mute.
I actually have a slide or two. If you could make me a
Yep.
co-host, I could show them.
Yep, I will do that right now. There you go. You should have access now. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There you go, Joe. There we go.
Everybody see that all right?
Yep.
Good.
Yep.
Okay. I'm not necessarily an authority on this. I have a field book. It's called the Leaderful Field Book, and this is one of the chapters. And in Leaderful Change, we talk about the need for change agents at multiple levels, and we're all familiar with our ability to work in a coaching capacity or facilitating, and certainly at the organizational level, where I think most of us are probably OD practitioners. But I think I suggested that at the level of the social network, we have this new word, weaver, and it may be very appropriate as the fulcrum of change for what we're doing in this experiment that, you know, Steve and Brittany are organizing for us. So to start, I guess just clarity on this concept of the social network. We tend to think of it as, you know, internet-based social media sites, and certainly it is those. But how about considering it, in our case, a kind of social structure as a web characterizing the relationships between us, and us could be not only individuals, but could be other groups and organizations. And the way we manage in a network certainly could be directed. You could have, you know, a very powerful node that pretty much sets the course of action for everybody else. But for the most part, the interaction tends to be collaborative, in which parties learn to share their resources in a way that's mutual to all those who are participating. So as I suggested, the word for the change agent in the social network, which was suggested by people like June Hawley, for example, is this idea of the weaver. I think, Steve, did you say you worked with
Cheryl Honey? You
worked with Cheryl. Okay.
Yeah.
And both June and Cheryl were probably the instigators of this whole approach. So the idea, of course, is that weavers, and maybe the weavers in our case are those involved in the working team, their role is to enhance the quantity and quality of the social ties to make the network more effective. And I've listed here some of the things that they do. And I think some of the things we're working on right now, in fact, I think embody some of these bullet points that you see listed here. And going one step deeper, here are some of the key functions of weavers that I've seen in the literature. And again, maybe for the working team, these are some purposes that maybe they may want to just, check on to see if it's consistent with what we have already established. I think we've been doing a lot with item number 1, which is natural because we're early on in the process, but eventually I think we're going to have to turn ourselves to questions of structure and communication, support and connecting members, introducing new members, troubleshooting bottlenecks, and at some point we're probably going to need to evaluate and course correct. Now, social network analysis has identified some of the key roles that we like to identify in social network work. And what I'm suggesting here are some things that weavers can do to kind of bring out the nature of some of these positive roles, especially in the case of high performers. These are people that are nodes in the network that know how to span across the network and build relationships. We have to know who they are, make sure we don't lose them. We have to welcome newcomers. The hidden stars tend to be people who oftentimes are quiet, but they generate meaning for the network. And sometimes the weaver needs to give them some visibility to get them off the fringe and into the mix. At the same time, we also have bottlenecks. These are people that, for whatever reason, seem to cause problems in advancing the process and cause of the network. But I think we need to get to the root of their concern. Sometimes they may be dependent on somebody else that's not doing the work, or maybe they have personal issues or things that are causing them to block activity. So we need to work with them in a different way, but work with them as well. And then lastly, I just thought, since we've been going through these steps, are there any core values that embody the work of the weaver? And I'm using some literature here from Paul Schmitz on the culture of collective impact, and maybe proposing these are 5 values for collective impact. And we start with collaboration, and you notice that I'm suggesting that weaving is not the same as binding. In fact, it's of a different quality. We're fomenting a dialogue. We're building trust. We're addressing conflict. Then the next potential value might be inclusion. Do we embrace diversity, not only of identity, but of views? Do we understand how power and privilege may distort our understanding of the problem? And then I have community engagement, making sure that all stakeholders to the effort have a voice. Fourthly, continuous learning, being open to feedback and acknowledge our own vulnerability and people's vulnerability. And then lastly, of course, the value of humility, understanding that whatever you do, it cannot be done without others. Perhaps some of you might recognize that value as embedded in the concept of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a Southern African theme that has come out certainly in the case of South Africa and its revolution. So I'll stop there, Steve, and if we have 1 or 2 extra minutes, maybe some people might like to make a comment.
Sure, yeah. It's open.
Since I jumped in and asked Joe to do this, it seems to me that it would be very helpful for us to think of ourselves as a social network going forward. And thinking of these aspects. And right now, I'm feeling that Steve is doing a lot of weaving, but as Joe said, each of us could be become in our own way a weaver in terms of how we relate. But I'm much more comfortable. If someone said, what's this thing you're doing? And I would say, well, it's a network of very committed, smart people who care about the future organization development and change. And we particularly focus on graduate education, doctoral education. But we are a network, and we have lots of nodes to people can grab a hold of. So is that sort of your intention, Joe, or am I imposing that on you? That we see ourselves as a network?
Yes, and I think I proposed this this idea of weaving in contrast. Sorry about my my throat here. I proposed it as, I think, a more OD-ish model of change compared to, say, this idea of binding. In other words, here's what we're going to do, follow me.
Yeah.
So I know someone was critical that that weaving may not necessarily incorporate leadership. And my answer to that, of course, is that it is leadership. It is everything about leadership.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Joe. I think it's important to have those thoughts reflected in the process. I've been adding some notes based on what you said to the document. So I'm gonna show my screen here, and we have 15 minutes. So what I want to do is make sure we get to our planning process and next steps. I'm just kind of making sure I got this here, and here.
Did we lose Steve?
I just got the teacher's out of the room. Let's be bad.
Well, I wondered, Joe, because you're now the host.
Yeah. Does anyone? Maybe I have to give up my hosting privilege. Does anyone know?
Yeah.
When he left, you were the last screen sharer. So I think, Tag, you're it.
Okay. Joe, this is Miguel. I just wanted to say how I've been writing on a chat how inspirational I found your slides. They were wonderful. And to me, it's just something connected with one of the earlier comments that someone made around how to revive the NTLs and the Tavistocks. Your own, this idea of weaving suggests to me that a possibly process methodologies of sorts that actually can create a way of bringing a practice around work and learning. So anyway, that's where my mind was going. So thank you for that.
Appreciate it.
Well, as we know, spirit gets involved sometimes and helps us, because by making Joe a co-host, we did not close the session on everybody. So thank you, Joe, for being a co-host just in the right nick of time. So yeah, so I wanted to move us into the next pieces, which are really important, I think, for those of you that want to see action and want to see us move to something concrete. We've done a lot of talking, and I think it's important to do this upfront talking, and we are going to give some real clear attention to action over the next month, and then we'll be getting into, when we come back for the new year, have really more actionable items. But please know, I'm not a idea guy only. I believe very firmly in kind of going slow to go fast, because once we start going fast, I don't want to leave anybody behind. That's important to me. So this is a starting point. So for those of you that are on the working team, so we have people here that are on the advisory group. Here, like I mentioned, it's leadership and stakeholder. We have the working advisory informed group. There's all people are here. You can be a working advisory informed group. You can pop in and get as involved as you want and pop out, whatever. The working group, for those of you that are going to be part of that, I'm going to invite you to a meeting, and I'll invite everybody, but I'll be focusing on the working group, those that are wanting to be into building the initiative planning and implementation platform in the details. So we're going to really kind of take all the input from today and start getting into these action steps being even more detailed out and very clear about our collaborative planning process. We will continue to invite broadly and engage intentionally. And again, this is my starting point. This is not the end. You have room to input on this. So you can type in comments right now live as we're talking. I'll pause here, but I wanted to explain this to you. As we move into the planning process, I use the change formula, the DVFS. Some of you know DVF, greater than R, dissatisfaction. I call it dissatisfaction, desire and data, vision, ennobling vision for what's possible. F, first steps, concrete actions, which Patrice would appreciate, to move towards action. And then I have, in my writings and work, I've added an S, which is sustainability, which I think you'd appreciate, but really sustaining progress and supporting progress and ensuring we follow through. And I'll share that article with you. Brittany, you might have it and can pop it into the chat for people. I also have a video I did on it. But essentially, that's kind of guiding what you're seeing here, because as we move into that 3 and move into 3, that's really kind of having a common database, an understanding of the current state, what's a dissatisfaction with the current state, as well as a desire for something. And really that, like as was mentioned, that environmental scan, but also the internal scan, taking some of the traditional strategic planning models, but really thinking about our history, which really honors future search and Marv Weisberg and Sandra Janoff's focus on really understanding history and its implications with the current state, and connecting that and having a common database around all of that, which would then move us into a strategic plan, a guiding document, a statement document that would have these 5 elements: mission, vision, goals, principles, and objectives. There are a lot of labels that you can name these things, but what I have found from some of my research is that these are the 5 kind of core concepts. We can title them differently. I just use these titles, but you have a sense of what I'm talking about there. That would move into us looking at a funding model and strategic partnerships, and really starting to think about, like, let's get some real asks out there, and let's make this something bigger than ideation and totally volunteer in one sense. But let's really think about how to grow this big through good funding and strategic partnerships. But I think the previous steps will help us make that case. And we want to communicate the strategy as an invitation to continue to invite people in. So how do we give that compelling strategy out there in a way that's kind of a brand awareness? I always think got milk. I think of got OD&C. That's kind of how I think of it. And I really think we need to be, for example, lobbying at the highest levels in government through the United States, Europe, and Asia, and Africa, other places around the world. I think we need to be really getting out there and lobbying and putting it in front of people. You may not know this, but Obama when he was president, created a executive order that the social and behavioral sciences shall be used in service of all government delivery in the United States to ensure that people are better served. You go search it up, it's probably buried somewhere, nobody really notices it, but it was written and put out there when he was president. We want to get that we want to make that out front and center, not let those things fall to the wayside. So that communication piece is really selling and branding and so forth, which would relate to the core foundation for us around this. How do we build an interactive community, grow it? And we need to be looking at project managing implementation around that, which would relate back to funding models of strategic partnerships, which are going to want to see some return on their investment into something that we're doing. And then I think we should always be reporting on progress and continuously improving. So let me just pause there because I know we're getting close to ending, but this and the next slide are really important for us to have closure that will be concrete. Any comments that you want to make, anything you want to add broadly, we'll take it to the working group to really flush this out. But what comments do you want to make sure that the working group has, or what comments you want to remember if you're a part of the working group?
Steve and others, as you were talking about involving at the highest levels and then the UN goals and then the purpose of OD, could we somehow tie those together, meaning that we want to be involved as the main resource or a resource for implementing all those sustainability goals that the UN has set forth, and then partnering with the UN to do something like that? Okay.
So I love that. And I'm looking at you over here, just so you know. So hi, but I'm looking at because the screens are up.
No problem.
But I think I love that. So please write that down here in 2 places. Put it in the parking lot on 17, because I think we want to have that in the strategy. I think it's great. We also are going to want to start building that into our planning process, inviting them in and engaging those partners in how we're building out this initiative. So I think it's really important. So please put that down in here in a very explicit fashion, if you would.
Sure.
Other thoughts, reactions?
Can I just say a word about this historical perspective? I was quite moved by David's comment because I remember that Kurt Lewin was a Holocaust survivor. And he established, I guess, the rudiments of the field of OD as a way to perhaps confront and maybe even someday end the types of conflicts that we saw in the case of World War II.
That's right.
So I think it's worthwhile to remember that as a kind of as an overall historical architecture for what we do.
And Joe, could you on 16 and 17 make a comment there on slide 16 and 17 if you're willing? 16, I think that's actually at a core value piece. You'll see that I dropped in from Joe's comments the values for our process. You might put it in there as well as in 17 as well, if you could make sure that and be explicit again, so we don't lose the core thing that you want. All right, so this is not the end. Just want to make sure we capture any thoughts around this, if you will, 10 steps that we have before us. Okay, without that or further ado, so to speak, I'll move to the needs. You can see this. We got what's going to happen is, for those of you that are on the working group, I'm going to be sending the invite out to everybody. But I would like in the chat, if you could put within the next month, give me some days and times, also your time zone if it's necessary. If you could put them in Eastern or New York time, that would be helpful to me. When would you like to meet? Give me a little guidance. We know we have holidays and stuff coming up, but I would like to have a 2 hour. I think we're going to need a 2 to 3 hour session to really flush out the planning, and we could maybe break it up. So we could do, but I do think we'll have at least a 2 hour session to work on the core documents. I think we could end up having 2 of them. So could you, in the chat, give me some days, times when you'd like to meet, for those of you that are willing to be part of the working group. I'll always invite everybody to come, but I just want to make sure that you make a point of that. Anything else you want to add in the needs and next steps, please add them there. But essentially, you can see the advisory group will be sending out to everybody this. And as time goes, Brittany will be on our website, what you see here. we'll be making sure when you go to members, you can click on members here. And what's really cool about the website is we got a spreadsheet. We can just make sure it shows. It doesn't have everybody in here, but from who all signed up. But essentially, we'll be having everybody listed in here and sort of their general role, but it'll be fleshed out. And we'll also have sponsors. We want to start like going back to the UN, maybe using our connections to get sponsors. You have organizations that want to be sponsors of this. You can come in. What's the ask of sponsorship right now? It's saying you're willing to contribute something meaningful to the advancement of this initiative through your organization. So I don't know what that means, but we would each one by one say, hey, if I want my organization to be a sponsor, one, you're lending your credibility to it or your organization, but also if you know an organization like the UN, wouldn't it be great if the UN was willing to sponsor something like this? Wouldn't it be great to have other organizations like AACSB or others be a partner with us in this? Or there's a European version of AACSB, which is really well respected and has made a lot of progress as well. So I can't remember the name. It has Ian. I can't remember it. But anyway, if you have ideas, and this will grow out. So when you click over here on resource, you can click on past meetings. What you're going to find is you'll see today's recording will be up above this. So you'll always see the most recent recording. And we'll put the chat into the in the notes section. We'll summarize what the meeting's about. We'll do a variety of different things. You'll be able to also see, you know, here we'll have our working strategy document will be here, as well as our platform document, designing the process document. That'll be in here. Members again will be here, and then we have home here. So we got those things. I'm watching time. I don't want to be honor that by saying that's where we're at. This is what we're going to do next. Put in the chat when we can meet next. I need that. I'll just take that. I'll create a couple things. I'll send a note out to those that are willing to be a part of it. And I'll be more formally creating the working group as we go over the next month. But I think we need to meet the next month. It might have to be in January, but maybe we can meet before the end of December. Just let me know. I'm not looking at chat right now, so I have no idea what you're putting in there. Last thing, if you could, put a testimonial, put an invitation, put a comment about what we're doing. What can I share from you all to other people to say, hey, come be a part of this, or any advice you have as you leave today? What advice would you have? Would you offer? Hey, Steve, make sure you're thinking about this. Don't forget that. Just what needs to be, what is your parting advice to ensure we make this what you want so that you'll come back? I have abandonment issues.
We love you, Steve. It's okay.
Thank you. I needed that. I needed that right now. Thank you, Dave. If I could get a hug right now from you, I would take it. So,
big thanks. Thank you very much. See you next
thanks,
time.
Hillary. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day. But anything you can say, per voice to say goodbye, but we are officially done. It's 11:31. So thank you all. Thanks. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very
Great
much.
session.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Steve.
And Tanya, when you said Tuesday night meetings, you're in Europe?
I think it's fine. It's already dark outside, but it's,
Well, I just need to make sure when you say Tuesday night, that means for me, that means during the afternoon or like.
This time is perfect for me.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think
Gotcha.
I don't know. It's for what it's for Eastern time in the US.
Right now it's 11:30. It's about it's 6 hours to where it depends on where you are in Europe, but 6 to 7 hours in that range.
And for the colleagues in California and so on, it's okay. It's too early.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, 10 is about as friendly as we can get because it helps everybody because people can come in at 7 on the West Coast. They can start 7 in the morning. So it's not as convenient, but it's not a problem. It's no,
Well,
so to
for
speak.
me, it's totally fine. It's perfect, and I'd love to participate, engage in it. I'm not sure how I can do it, but I will. And I love this bold moves that we're focusing, and it's great to be part of it. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you. Well, thanks for making time. Thank you. It's really good. I
Thank
look
you
forward to
very
getting to know
much.
you. Okay, thanks.
Hope to be part of it again. Bye bye.
Bye. All right, Carol. So
Can I, with no words, reach out
Yeah.
to you?
yeah. Yeah.
Can I have it back?
Yeah.